This is a help video for the 5.03 TGA. So number one says use the equation, and they're giving you an equation to answer these questions. A says what is the solution to the equation? B says what is the extraneous solution and why? And C says in general, what is an extraneous solution? So this is a pretty detailed question. So I made an example of something similar to number one in my example, and we are solving for n. We do want to make sure that our radical is isolated on either the left or the right-hand side of the equation. So it is isolated on the right-hand side. So since it is a square root, to remove a square root, we're going to square both sides. If I had a cube root, then I would cube both sides and so forth. So I'm going to start by squaring both sides. I'm going to remember that the binomial squared is something that we make careless mistakes on. So instead of trying to square it like it is, I'm going to write n minus 1 down twice. On the right-hand side, the square and the square root are opposite operations, so they'll cancel each other out. I'll be left with a 2n plus 6. On the left-hand side, I'm going to multiply these two binomials out by distributing. So I'm going to get n squared minus 1n minus 1n plus 1. I still have 2n plus 6 on the right-hand side. I'm going to combine like terms on the left-hand side. Both sides have been simplified at this point. Now I'm going to locate where my n squared is. It's on the left-hand side of the equation. So if I'm solving and I have an n squared just on one side of the equation, I want to move everything over to the side where the n squared is. So I have this positive 2n, so I want to subtract 2n. I have this positive 6, so I want to subtract 6. I must do the same thing to both sides. So that's going to leave me with n squared minus 4n minus 5. Everything cancels on the right-hand side because I want that right-hand side to be equal to 0, because in the next step I'm going to factor my trinomial. Since 5 is negative, that means my signs are going to be different. So I want to do plus minus. The only two things that multiply to be n squared is n times n. The only things that multiply to be 5 is 1 and 5 or 5 and 1. I do need to get a middle term of negative 4. So my 1 has to be positive and my 5 has to be negative. And then I set each factor equal to 0 and I solve. That's going to give me an n of negative 1 and an n of positive 5. Anytime we're solving an equation that has a square root in it, there's always a chance that I might have an extraneous solution. So an extraneous solution comes about when you solve an equation and you get an answer by solving, but it doesn't check in the original problem. So what I have to do now is I have to take my negative 1 and my positive 5, and I have to check. So let me just circle back up here so y'all can follow my pattern here. So we have to check in the original equation. So my original equation was n minus 1 is equal to the square root of 2n plus 6. So I'm going to check my n equals negative 1 by plugging negative 1 into all my x's or all my n's. That's going to look like this. Negative 1 minus 1 equals the square root of 2 times negative 1 plus 6. Negative 1 minus 1 is negative 2. I'm going to get negative 2 plus 6 here, which is negative 4. The square root of negative 4 is the imaginary number 2i. So a negative 2 is not going to be equal to a 2i. So that means I have to throw out n equals negative 1. That would be an example of an extraneous solution. So let me try the 5. So again, we're trying to check to see if 5 is an extraneous solution by plugging it back into the original problem in every place that there is an n. So we're going to do 5 minus 1 is equal to the square root of 2 times 5 minus plus 6. 5 minus 1 is 4. 2 times 5 is 10. 10 plus 1 is 6. So that's the square root of 16. We have 4 on the left. The square root of 16 is 4. So n equals 5 is the only solution. Sometimes both solutions check and you have more than one answer. Sometimes one checks and one doesn't, so you just have one solution. Sometimes neither of the solutions check, and then that means you would have no solution to your problem. So to follow up on the A, the B, and the C, again, please be really neat with your work here. So I can tell what's going on. So A is going to be, what is the solution? So we're going to say, for my example, N is 5. B says, what is the extraneous solution? So the extraneous solution is -1. Why? And I would write something like, -1 does not check in the original equation. You could say -1 is not a solution to the original equation. And then C says, in general, what is an extraneous solution? So an extraneous solution is solving an equation, okay? Solving an equation and having a solution not check in the original problem. So make sure that you go back, make sure that you show your work for your solving, go back and make sure that you answer the A, the B, and the C. And remember, you don't have to type all this in. You can write it on your notebook paper, take a picture, just make sure it's a good picture, make sure it's close enough up so I can see it. And then you could submit your picture for this instead of trying to write everything. Okay, so that's number 1. Number 2 and number 3 are very similar. Okay, 2 and 3 are similar to each other. I'm not going to do an example for these for 2 and 3, but I am going to just kind of walk you through what they're asking you to do. So it says the equation x plus 2 equals the square root of 3x plus 10 is of the form x plus a. So your 2 is your a, equals the square root of bx plus c. So your b is 3 and your c is 10. And then it says where a, b, and c are all positive integers, meaning no decimals, no fractions, and they must be positive. And then it restricts b to being greater than 1. Using this equation as a model, create your own equation that has extraneous solutions. So you've got to create an equation that is in this form, x plus a equals the square root of bx plus c, where a, b, and c are all positive integers, and b has to be greater than 1. Okay, such that 7 is a solution, and there is an extraneous solution. And then there's a hint. Okay, so for the A part, you're going to find an A value, a B value, and a C value, where these are all positive integers and B is greater than 1, such that 7 is the solution. 7 is one of your solutions, and there is one solution that is extraneous. Hint, substitute 7 for x and choose a value for a. Substitute 7, so we've got this equation, x plus a is equal to square root of bx plus c. Substitute 7 for x, so we're going to put a 7 here, and choose an a. Okay, the only restrictions on your a is that a has to be positive and a has to be an integer, meaning no decimals, no fractions. So you're just going to pick an a value. Okay, I'm just going to pick one here. I'm not going to work this one completely out. A must be positive, and it must be an integer. So I'm just going to pick 2. You can pick any integer that is positive. And then over here, it says choose a value for A. Then square both sides. So we still have the B. X is 7. And then we have the C. So it says square both sides, so you can choose A, B, and C. Choose an A, B, and a C that will fit the description of our equation. So 7 plus 2 is 9. Over here, we're going to end up with 7B plus C. They're telling us to square both sides. So that's going to tell me if you let your A be 2, and this is just my example, then your square and your square root cancel out. If you let your A be 2, then your 7 times your B plus your C has got to be equal to 81. And then you can figure out what your B and your C will be. So if you choose A as 2, then you have to figure out what your B and your C is going to be by using this little equation here. Now, if you chose something other than 2 for your A, so for instance, if you chose 3 for your A, then you would get 7 plus 3, which is 10. And then you would square both sides and you would get 100. So your 7 times your B plus your C would have to give you 100. And then that would help you find your B and your C. Okay? So using this a little bit of knowledge that I'm giving you, you're going to find your A, your B, and your C. And then the B part, okay? So the B part says take your new equation. So this is the equation that you're going to have for your A, your B, and your C. So you're going to do X plus your A. You'll put a number in there. Equals the square root of BX. You'll put the B in. You'll leave the X plus your C. Then you're going to take your new equation that you got from finding your A, your B, and your C in A, and you're going to solve it. So then you'll do your work for solving it. Again, you'll have a number for your A, a number for your B, and a number for your C. Okay, that's how you're going to do number 2. Number 3 is very, very similar to number 2. So let's look at 3. 3 says consider the equation X minus A equals the square root of BX plus C. So exactly the same, except it has an X minus A, where A, B, and C are all positive integers and B is greater than 1. Same exact problem, except it's got a minus A here. A says create an equation of this form that has 7 as the solution. So you'll follow the hint in number 2 because they're telling you 7 is the solution there. And it has an extraneous solution. Give the extraneous solution. So A, you're going to create the equation. So A, you're going to figure out what your A, your B, and your C are. You're going to plug those back in. So you're going to plug it back in. X minus your A, you'll put the number in for A, equals square root. And then B times your X, you'll put your number in for B, and then plus C. And then they're asking you to solve it. This is still the A. Give the extraneous solution. All that is in A. And then B says, what must be true about the value of BX plus C to ensure that there is a real solution to the equation, and explain. So they're asking you to come up with, what did you figure out here in the process of doing this problem? What do you know about the value of BX plus C in order for there to be one real solution? And then it says explain. So really you need to get through number 2. And by working number 2, it's going to help you set up number 3 and then make sure that you answer both of these. All right, hopefully that is helpful. If you still have questions, reach out to me.